Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:07 on a Friday in your nation's capital after a busy, long, hot summer week as we round out the month of June and launch us straight into the second half of 2025, including July 4th week next week. Thanks for tuning in to O'Connor and Company. Later this morning at 6:35, Stuart Whitson, he's running for that Republican nomination for the special election in Virginia, which is tomorrow, by the way. So Stuart Whitson wants your attention today. At 7:35, Ilya Shapiro will talk about the decisions that came down yesterday from the Supreme Court and some pretty big ones that are still coming. Maybe today, probably today. And then at 8:05, Steve Moore, Heritage Foundation. All things big, beautiful bill and the rescissions and the maybe shift at the Federal Reserve chairmanship, maybe some better jobs numbers coming out, lots of economic issues coming forward. We'll talk to Steve Moore about all that. I am Larry O'Connor. That right there. Patrice Onwuka. All right, say it, Patrice. Do it to me.
Happy Friday, everybody.
There it is. Is it? It's hot and muggy.
Every Friday is a Friday. We are going into the weekend, Larry. Take some sunshine from me, some energy. Let's go. We got a few more hours. We're going to roll through today.
What do you say? Take some sunshine in the rain. It's been rainy.
Hey, there is still
muggy,
the sun is shining somewhere, even if there's rain clouds over your home right now, Larry.
It's true. This has been a longer than normal week. I think it's the Iran thing. I think it's the and all the fallout in CNN. CNN continues to try to distort their story. It's like, we weren't reporting on what we thought was the results of the bombing, which is literally exactly what they did. There's a couple of great montages out there put together. We're going to play that a little later in the program. And more assessments come in that do confirm that it was a successful attack. Although, by the way, can you imagine this news media reporting on World War II? It's like, 48 hours later.
Goodness.
Okay. What's the totality of the assessment? I was like, it takes weeks to figure out, months sometimes, especially with a hostile nation like Iran.
And the funny thing is, my husband and I were watching Midway last night and watching Japan attack Pearl Harbor, and I thought to myself, would the left even want to cover? Would news agencies report it the same way today, or would the left even think we should have jumped into World War II? They would think we provoked Japan. I mean, this is where we're at, unfortunately, today.
They'd have a roundtable on CNN, and 80% of the people say, "Well, if you really think about it, Japan has a point." I mean,
unfortunately, that's what they would say.
We'll discuss that a little further in the morning as well. But I do want to turn to what's going on with the Supreme Court. So usually this last Thursday, yesterday, the 26th, we would have, all these decisions come out in June. And they usually leave the biggest till the last. Mm-hmm. And usually Thursday is that day. But we got one big decision yesterday, and it was a big one. And the decision was good, and it was 6-3. Mm-hmm. And Planned Parenthood was the loser. So we like that. Yes. That's good. And we can get into the details of that decision, but there's a lot of decisions still hanging there, like four major ones, and we don't know. I mean, I guess they could come out on Friday. Friday's a rare day for big Supreme Court decisions, but they usually always come out in June. I don't remember any of them coming out in July. I guess we could have some on Monday, I suppose, right?
Which is still June. Monday would still be June, the end of the month. If you think about it, just how many emergency cases they've had to take during this term of major weight and significance, it's not surprising that they had to procrastinate a little bit on their term papers.
Yeah. Supreme Court, by the way, yesterday's decision had to do with the state of South Carolina. South Carolina basically ended payments to Planned Parenthood through Medicaid reimbursements, right? Mm-hmm. And this was for all the stuff so Planned Parenthood claims they do, abortion is like 0.1% of what we really do. We really do. They used to claim that they did mammograms until a big expose that
women's overall health care.
Lila Rose, I believe, from Life Action. That was one of her or Live Action. She did this was one of her first undercover stings. where she would have young women go into Planned Parenthood abortionaries and say, yes, I'm here for a mammogram. And then they would just give a referral to an actual clinic that actually had mammograms. But Planned Parenthood for years had been claiming that that was one of the vital services of women's reproductive health, which, by the way, mammograms have nothing to do with reproduction. But they would say that this is one of the vital things that they do for women's health. And then, of course, it was a lie. And so they had to change that. Yeah, it was just
cover for what they're really doing, yes.
They claim they do these. And to be fair, these days now, they do. There's a huge portion of their business that is not directly related to abortion. Unfortunately, it's all transgender chemical castration, drugs for gender transition, and preparation for actual physical genital mutilation. It's the whole transgender stuff. That said, set that aside. They claim they do a bunch of stuff. South Carolina
like
said, yeah, you know what?
Birth control, yeah.
Right. We're not going to let people on Medicaid claim Medicaid benefits for the services that they're getting from a Planned Parenthood. You want those medical services, you can go to a place that isn't really going to take all this Medicaid money and use it to underwrite the abortion services that you do here. And Planned Parenthood sued, and the Supreme Court said, no, South Carolina has every right to do that. Just because you're Planned Parenthood, you don't get to get treated specially. So it was a 6-3 decision. Again, same 6, same 3. So that was good. Taxpayers shouldn't be forced to subsidize a provider that makes all of its money and spends all of its money on abortions. Nothing wrong with that. Upheld. Fantastic. But what about these other decisions that we're still waiting for? I mean, there's some blockbuster ones that we're still waiting down. Things like a school district in Montgomery County who told parents, they're being sued by parents of a strong religious faith, that they want to be able to opt out their children from objectionable, sexually oriented instruction in their school systems. And forever, parents have had the right to opt their children out. Montgomery County, a year and a half ago, as our listeners know very well because we cover it here, has said, no, parents can't opt out. Sorry, you don't have a choice. And so they're being sued. And that's a big one that we're waiting to hear. Hopefully we expected it yesterday, Patrice.
I think another one is going to be this First Amendment lawsuit in Texas, where Texas laws, and we've seen this across a number of states, particularly red states, are enacting laws that require people to verify their age before accessing porn sites. This is all part of kind of child online protection to ensure that children are not accessing, pornography, inappropriate content for their ages. And if you remember, Larry, back in the old days of the internet, you'd go to a porn site and there would be kind of stop, are you 18? Click yes or no. That was a voluntary way of saying I'm old enough. And how many kids would just, the good ones
I'm sorry. What do you mean, as you would remember, Larry?
I'm just saying generally our collective memory about how the internet has, evolved over time. What makes you think
I have memory of accessing pornographic websites?
Maybe you were Googling something and you accidentally landed on a website that said XXXXX in big red letters.
Who
and was
have
all
you
black
been talking to?
My point is that we have a lot of states are finally catching up and trying to enact laws to protect children and what they can see online. And
as usual, the pornographers are claiming a First Amendment right to pollute our society with this bill.
They are. They're claiming that this is an infringement on their speech. So I think the Supreme Court weighing in, that's going to have pretty broad implications of I think probably dozens of states now, or close to half a dozen states. We'll see if the court hands something down on that case today.
Yep, there's that one. There's also, of course, the birthright citizenship, and that may end up being a determination on what federal courts can do in terms of nationwide injunctions, or it could very well then be a domino effect and have a larger, broader decision. We don't know specifically about birthright citizenship. I suspect it'll be that. It'll be the latter. That's the reason why we haven't heard that decision quite yet, because it's going to be such a blockbuster. I don't know. We'll see. And we'll talk to Ilya Shapiro later this morning at 7:35 about all these decisions that we're all sort of collectively holding our breath for. Right now it's 5:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Patrice, I don't think it's an overstatement to suggest that our immigration policies are very much in the spotlight right now as far as a nation examining our treatment of and disposition towards people from other countries coming into the United States. And I think everybody, for the most part, agrees that if people from other nations want to come and visit America on a tourist visa, see our great sites, especially here in Washington, D.C., or as the nation's capital, we often have many foreign dignitaries flying into America or people from foreign countries coming into the Washington, D.C. area to do business with our federal government. That's obviously going to be something that we have to have a good policy for and things like that. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Goes without saying. Although I would suggest perhaps based on this most recent story, we might want to re-examine how welcoming we should be here in Washington, D.C. to anyone coming here from foreign nations, certainly from Egypt, if this guy who is in the news today is any indication of how they treat our country and, more importantly, our dogs. CBS News has the story. A man has pleaded guilty to a federal crime after he was accused of assaulting a police canine at Dulles International Airport, kicking it so hard that the dog went airborne.
Oh, my goodness.
Imagine kicking a dog so hard that the dog flies off the ground into the air. This was an Egyptian national, and he kicked a Customs and Border Protection canine, a 5-year-old beagle named Freddie.
This was not like a Doberman Pinscher. This is a beagle, so it's kind of small, right?
A beagle. And his job was to screen luggage. That's his job. He was doing his job Tuesday over at Dulles. And at the baggage claim area, where Egypt Air Flight 981 luggage was being brought out after arriving, Freddie, who's trained to find illicit agricultural contraband because he's a beagle and they're good sniffers, aren't they? Little beagles like to sniff everything. He alerted to a piece of luggage and tried to inspect it further. According to the affidavit, the owner of the luggage, Hamded Ali Marie, who I believe should be getting the electric chair for this kind of behavior, came over to the dog. Agents started talking to the agent, and according to the affidavit, shortly after the conversation began, Marie kicked Canine Freddie. Canine Freddie was kicked so hard he was lifted off the ground. Canine Freddie was injured and was taken to the veterinary emergency room. Now, I want you to know that they did find contusions to his right forward rib area, but Canine Freddie is going to be okay. Not so much for the Egyptian national. He will be immediately deported. But again, I think we should consider the electric chair first before deportation.
So, all right, I'm going to be partially, you guys know, I'm not a critter fan. I don't like animals, but I respect animals trained with law enforcement because they're doing an important job. I want dog sniffing bombs. I mean, bomb sniffing dogs. You know, I want dogs.
Pet those dogs when they're working, let alone.
No, yeah, you're not. You do not want to disrupt their jobs, and they serve an important purpose. So throw the book at this guy. Do we need to strap him up to the electric chair? There are a lot of other criminal illegal aliens who should be strapped in the chair far sooner than him. But you know, this is a good example of why we should be able to get rid of criminal illegal aliens very quickly. Why can we not get rid of Kilmar Abrego Garcia? Yet we can get rid of this guy for kicking a dog at the airport in a matter of like 2 or 3 days. So this is one of those stories where, you know, I will even stand up for the animal in this case.
I appreciate that. Thank you for extending yourself. I might be overstating the case when I said he should get the electric chair, but it is a despicable act. I am waiting for Chris Van Hollen to come to his defense and say, hey, he's just an Egyptian. He's a Virginia man. This happened in Dulles. By the way, Canine Freddie also did a great job because it turns out that suitcase that Canine Freddie found, it weighed 100 pounds, and it was filled with 55 pounds of beef, 44 pounds of rice, 15 pounds of eggplant, cucumbers, and bell peppers, 2 pounds of corn seeds, pounds of herbs. You can't be bringing that stuff into a car. You're traveling across the planet with 55 pounds of beef? What is
the
going
beef
on
and
here?
the vegetables, anything that could, I think the herbs, maybe I might pass the herbs unless they are the ones that you smoke. Those herbs, yeah, you need to be thrown behind bars. But if it's like a unique seasoning that you use for your meat to tenderize it, maybe I will give them pass. The other stuff, no. I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
You can buy beef
Canine.
probably cheaper.
Good job, Canine Freddy. You did your job. You're a
Yes.
great beagle. You deserve to get retired now, although I still want you on that wall finding these guys. And this guy, this Egyptian, honestly, we might want to do a whole visitor ban from Egypt at this point if this is how they're going to treat our canines. It's 5:23. Oh, my gosh, Patrice, I'm so excited. I might have to sit back and let you handle all of this because, I get overcome with stories like this. Meghan Markle is back in the news. And as a former subject of the British Crown, perhaps you should just take the lead here. What's she doing now?
All right, here we've got Meghan Markle. She's being called out by fans for discovering her brand's products are actually knockoffs, rip-offs from none other than William Sonoma. This lady, she can't come up with an original idea and execute on anything other than holding a briefcase full of cash that is not hers. So here we have
Wait, hold on.
brand
So she's been going to market and selling all this. Oh, buy my Meghan Markle, whisks and mixing bowls and cookware.
Her brand
and
is
it turns
called
out
As
it's
Ever.
it's just relabeled William Sonoma stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you see these kinds of deals from time to time where, someone else will come up with a product and license out that product to other brands. But, she's going around saying that these are her bottles. So, for example, here, a bottle of orange blossom honey apparently is coming from a supplier used by William Sonoma and probably pretty much the same place. This is called Savannah Bee Company. I actually have heard of Savannah Bee Company. So, she's a ripoff. She's a knockoff. She is not someone that anyone should be modeling themselves
Patrice,
after.
Hold on. I think I'm going to model myself after her. She's freaking brilliant. She's selling herbal tea for 3 times the original price just because she put her name on it. That's brilliant. Let's go. All right, we're coming up with our own tea brand. It's 5:30 in the nation's capital.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
5:37, O'Connor and Company. Very excited to start selling you our O'Connor and Company herbal tea.
And honey.
Stay tuned for that. Yeah.
And honey.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Some honey. Yeah. But we have a lot in common with Meghan Markle. We also were not invited to the Jeff Bezos wedding in Venice.
I know.
So
I just wanted to be a fly on the wall, but it's okay. It's okay.
At 6:35, we'll speak with Stuart Whitson. He's running for that special election for Congress in Northern Virginia. At 7:35, Ilya Shapiro on the Supreme Court wrapping up this final days of June. And then at 8:05, Steve Moore will give us an insight into where we stand economically in this country. We also have some Michelle Obama news coming up, so stay tuned for that. It's Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka. Morning, Patrice.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Yes, and before we get to Steve Moore coming up at 8:05, why don't you give us a quick rundown here on where things stand economically, because we've got a lot of developments, it appears, in the status of the Big Beautiful Bill, which, of course, is really just a giant tax cut bill.
Yeah, so we were expecting to see the Senate vote on its version of the Big Beautiful Bill, which would, frankly, improve a lot of the House's great provisions already. And just a reminder, basic, folks, if this bill does not pass, there will be a massive tax increase for virtually everybody at the end of the year. So the big update was that the parliamentarian in the Senate has decided to block some of the Medicaid changes. For example, Republicans are saying if you're here illegally, you should not get access to Medicaid. She struck that out. She also struck out a funding mechanism that would have raised hundreds of billions of dollars to pay for the tax cuts by, changing kind of the formulas around taxing taxes for, hospitals when it comes to Medicaid. we kind of expected that the parliamentarian would strike some things, but this was a pretty big blow for Republicans and for conservatives because, again, the changes is going to strike out hundreds of billions of dollars that make it harder for Republicans to really meet those budget targets. So that, you can say that you're actually cutting the size of government somewhat in addition to cutting taxes.
What are you going to do? I mean, you can't defy Article non-existent in the Constitution that says that the parliamentarian can override the will of the American people. I mean, what are we doing here? Who elected the parliamentarian? She was placed in that position by Harry Reid in 2012. Do we think that the person that Harry Reid placed in that position is going to be in any way open to a reconciliation package that Trump Republicans and MAGA Republicans are putting through? This is outrageous. And why is John Thune and the Republican majority acting like their hands are tied? Well, what are you going to do? I mean, she has more power than we do. No, that's ridiculous. You don't have to follow what the parliamentarian says. You're the leader of this. I'll tell you what's going on here, Patrice. This is politically expedient for them. They don't have to vote on some of the things that the Democrats were going to claim. Oh, you're cutting Medicaid. Now they don't have to deal with that. They can just say, hey, well, I'd love to cut Medicaid, but we can't do it because the parliamentarian told us.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying. I do think, though, I've seen something come from Senator Thune, or maybe he responded to a reporter request saying that there could be some changes we make, maybe in the language, tweaking the language somewhat so that hopefully it would still pass parliamentarian muster. Nonetheless, I do think the goal is still to try to vote on this bill sometime this weekend, set like a vote-a-rama. There could be amendments to the bill. We'll see what happens. I don't think that this is, while everyone's saying, okay, this is the end of the bill, this is a huge, massive setback.
It's not the end of the bill.
It's an obstacle and a stumbling block. I don't think it's a setback, especially if you can work around the parliamentarian. Which I think you should do. The pushback to saying, well, let's just remove her or ignore her is that in the future, if perchance, and God forbid, but that might happen, Democrats regain power and they're trying to ram through massive policy through the same budget reconciliation process, then, they're going to say, well, you guys did this when it comes to the parliamentarian in the past, so we're going to do it now. I think that's kind of the concern. Same with,
I'm sure it is, but just ask yourself for a second. If Democrats were in this exact same position, do you think they would hesitate to do that?
Oh, they wouldn't. They would just go. They blow through norms all the time.
So don't worry that, Democrats might do it. Trust me, Democrats will do it, whether you do it or not. So just do it. Because here's the problem. If they're not able to get those cuts through, it has no chance of getting past the House right now. They barely got it out of the House. And part of getting it out of the House was, and by the way, those cuts are not even cuts. Those cuts say if you're in the country illegally, you shouldn't get Medicaid paid for by taxpayers. Parliamentarian can't come in. Nope, sorry, I'm the parliamentarian, and you've got to spend that Medicaid money on people in the country illegally. Who the hell is the parliamentarian? Quick, what's the parliamentarian's name?
Exactly.
No. You had to look for that. You're not allowed to look. See, nobody knows.
It escaped me for a minute.
Why is this nameless, faceless person that nobody knows who was appointed 13 years ago by Harry Reid suddenly got veto power over how we conduct our business through our elected representatives? It's outrageous.
Yeah, I hear you. It's incredibly frustrating. That said, I'm not part of the people who say, okay, well, July 4th, there's no way the Senate would be able to pass this bill. I mean, I do think that the Senate can. They can probably make some tweaks, and they can probably try and get this through. The other, like I said, the other part of it is just the healthcare provider tax, which is raising money for the tax cuts, and she kind of struck that out. So, we'll see how that works out, because honestly, I think she's just getting pressure from a lot of the hospitals and a lot of the outside groups who are, in the healthcare community, who are saying, well, if you're raising taxes on us, then, this is going to be bad for care, and the sky is going to fall. They don't want anything to come out of their bottom line. So, I am sunny. I am hopeful, and I do believe that we will see votes this weekend in the Senate Senate. I do believe the Senate can pass this bill, and then it goes back to the House. And frankly, for the handful of Republicans who may have different issues with the one big beautiful bill, at the end of the day, I would be really careful about using this, holding up the bill, holding up what this bill represents, which is not just tax cuts. It also includes border security money. It also includes rolling back the Green New Scam that the Biden administration imposed on everyone. So there's a lot to be said, and I'd be cautious about saying, well, if it fails, we can start from scratch. We saw how.
Oh no, there's no starting from scratch. The next
step
is going to be.
There's no starting from scratch here.
Yeah, if the House can't accept what the Senate lays out, which they probably can't, then they're going to have a conference committee. And the July 4th deadline is an artificial deadline. That's just Trump wanted it by July 4th. The real deadline is when the debt ceiling hits, and that is what Treasury Secretary.
I believe. That's what. Well,
yeah,
towards.
I mean, he hasn't said exactly when he thinks that is. It'll be when he decides. It's 5:44.
Later this morning at the Chris Plante Show, the Washington Post says immigrants drive population growth and a graying America. Just don't call it the replacement theory. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
All right, setting aside the big, beautiful bill and what might come or not come with all those tax cuts, we're also continuing to see kind of the Cold War getting hotter and hotter between President Trump and Fed Chair Powell here.
Yes.
Again, the economy continues to chug along.
It does.
The inflation continues to be stabilized. The jobs numbers seem to be stable as well, although we'll see we had some higher unemployment claims come up. And yet Powell seems determined to keep interest rates exactly where they are. He had no problem moving them and trying to sort of ease up interest rate tension and pressure when the election was coming up, where it would have helped Biden and Kamala Harris. But now suddenly, when it seems like you know this better than I do, Patrice, but it seems like the economic indicators are such that these interest rates seem extraordinarily high compared to where the economy is right now. I don't know what the worries are, but he continues to, and his claims are, well, there's uncertainty because of tariffs. What do you mean uncertainty? I don't get it. You can always modify the interest rates again if things do go wacko, but right now they're not.
I would agree with you. I mean, he may be looking at our gross domestic product readings, which the third reading came in as in the first quarter of this year, the economy shrank by 0.5%. And then this was actually a little bit worse than the first reading. But generally, a lot of the other measures of the economy, are pretty strong and pretty stable. And so I think there's a good reason to say, well, let's start to give some consumers, let's start to give anyone who's borrowing, some relief by cutting the interest rates. And so, but Jerome Powell, he was slow to the start. He was slow to the draw when we saw inflation take off back in 2021. He didn't want to even acknowledge it then. And then by the time it was, over 9%, it was too late for him to really start doing anything. And that's when he decided to start raising the interest rate. So don't expect him to be ahead of the curve, Larry. Don't expect him to be, in the middle of the curve. He is definitely a tail end of the curve type of federal chairman. And, that has implications for everyone else in this country, including the broader economy.
Yeah, he seems somnambulant. He's like sleeping his way through this thing, and he was less than impressive when he was questioned by Congress earlier this week. So his term is set to expire in May of next year, basically 11 months from now. Mm-hmm. But Trump has been none too shy about his displeasure with his performance, Chairman Powell's, and he talks about it all the time. So now he's in it. He could theoretically, I think he could remove him if he wanted to, but he doesn't want the political fallout on that and all the things. So instead, what he's thinking of doing is naming his successor now, 11 months ahead of time. Basically like having a shadow Fed chairman, And according to the Wall Street Journal, he's considering naming, two people who are very close to him right now. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, which I think most people would say, please don't do that. Keep him right where he is. He's doing a great job. And then Dennis Hassett, who is actually has been one of his closest economic advisors, not just in this term, but in the first term as well. which he probably has the early lead in the running because I think that Trump trusts him. But do you think that would be a good move for him to name basically the shadow Fed chair, the Fed chair in waiting, and just sort of have him looming over Powell for the next 11 months?
I mean, for the fun of it, yeah, I'm all about a little bit of shade and and contention. There won't be contention. I shouldn't say that word, but I mean, I do think it would be interesting. The headlines will really be unnerving to Jerome Powell, where every time Jerome Powell does something, then there's going to be a quote from this kind of his successor in the waiting, and I'm sure that's going to have him thinking twice about everything he does, and maybe it would kind of nudge him along a little bit faster. So listen, I'm all here for a little bit of drama. Why not?
Well, and also, by the way, I said Dennis Hassett. I meant Kevin Hassett. I apologize. And he's currently the director of the National Economic Council.
Yes.
And he used to be the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors in the first term for President Trump. It would be an obvious vote of no confidence for Mr. Powell, and it would send the signal. Because listen, Trump makes a lot of noise, and Trump, complains and he criticizes. But a lot of times, you can end up being on his good side, and he ends up liking you, even if he just berated you. So this would be unequivocal. This would let Powell know, no, there's no wiggle room here. You're done. You've got 11 months. You're a lame duck. And maybe Mr. Powell, just out of his own dignity, would see the writing on the wall, know that his successor has already been chosen, and just step down and resign early as the chairman.
I don't think he would, though. I think he feels like he's going to stay it through, stay the course until the very end. It wouldn't surprise me if you have to kind of drag him out. Every time I say that, drag him out, kicking and screaming, somehow I get quoted in articles. The president's going to drag somebody out, kicking and screaming. I am not saying that this time around, but it wouldn't surprise me if Jerome Powell will stick it out to the very end.
Don't forget, earlier this month when he was putting up the flagpoles on the South Lawn, he was talking about Powell. Here he is. This is cut 4, President Trump criticizing the chairman. Oh, we don't have it? Oh, wait, never mind. Well, that's right. We can get to it later, and we'll also get to it when we speak with Steve Moore later in the program. I'll get his assessment of this as well. That's at 8:05. Right now, it's 5:54.